Hello, my name is Charlotte Gardes and I work in the International Monetary Fund on climate finance and climate finance policy, especially supporting emerging markets, developing economies, and low-income states to scale up climate finance and to make sure that the financial sector supports the allocation of capital towards low-carbon technologies and sectors in those countries. Substantial investment in low-emissions technologies, such as renewable energy, is needed to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. The International Energy Agency estimates that by the end of 2030, climate mitigation investment needs will increase to about $2 trillion per year in emerging market and developing economies. That's about 40% of global investment needs. This implies that climate mitigation investments will have to climb to 12% of total investments in emerging market and developing economies by 2030, which is a significant increase over the next 7 years from the current 3%. The private sector will have to play a key role in financing climate mitigation investments in emerging market and developing economies, given the limited fiscal space amid challenging market conditions. Our estimates suggest that the share of private finance must increase significantly. By 2030, private finance will have to cover around 80% of the climate mitigation investment needs in emerging market and developing economies. Excluding China, the private financing share is about higher, about 90%. Some larger emerging markets have the capacity to attract private finance, but the financing needs are large and external costs are high and rising. By contrast, smaller and less developed economies have more modest climate mitigation investment needs, but face significant hurdles to mobilizing private finance. Because more than half of global greenhouse gas emissions come from major emerging markets, they need significant mitigation investments. But these countries have market access and sometimes deep domestic capital markets. Developing economies contribute less than 15% to global greenhouse gas emissions. They have fewer climate mitigation investment needs, but less access to global markets and less ability to attract private capital, as their financial and capital markets are less developed. Climate investment flows have been increasing both globally and in emerging market developing economies, but remain limited. Despite a proliferation of supportive financial sector policies and climate commitments by financial institutions, a substantive shift in financing flows from high to low emissions assets, in particular in emerging market and developing economies, has still not materialized. Many emerging market and developing economies indeed face fundamental challenges in attracting private sector capital, even before considering barriers specifically related to climate finance. Capital allocation to emerging market and developing economies is largely determined by global financial institutions, with many avoiding these economies due to concerns about perceived risk-return profiles, navigating complexities, reputational risk, and stringent ESG regulations. About 40% of emerging markets and nearly all developing economies do not reach an investment-grade rating or have no rating at all. As a result, most large institutional investors do not invest in these countries. In some emerging market and developing economies, high political risks, legal and institutional uncertainty, and implementation risks are hurdles that add to the already high financing costs. In addition, the lack of well-structured, investable climate project pipelines is often an obstacle to the development of private capital. It comes in addition to high cost of capital and risk premiums. Low domestic capital market development also limits resource mobilization and deters international investors. Furthermore, managing foreign exchange risk is a challenge, leading to limited or no exposure to foreign exchange risks. Commercial hedging options exist in larger emerging market developing economies, but are expensive, limited, and incomplete, especially for large-scale projects. They're virtually non-existent in smaller emerging markets and low-income countries. Furthermore, emerging market and developing economies still lack high-quality, reliable, and comparable climate-related data, making the assessment of risks and opportunities more complex for investors. Given the political hurdles of implementing carbon pricing and specific challenges related to emerging market developing economies, a broad mix of policies is needed to create an attractive investment environment for private capital to support climate finance needs in these countries. Carbon pricing, as well as the reform of fossil fuel subsidies, can be highly effective in shifting private capital flows to low emissions investments by providing a strong and credible price signal to investors. But carbon pricing may be politically challenging to implement and should be complemented with other policies. Further structural policies are needed in emerging market developing economies to mobilize domestic and international private climate finance, including structural reforms, strong climate policies and commitments, well-designed subsidies where fiscal space allows, and innovative financing approaches to phasing out coal. Non-pricing policies are crucial, given that transformation in the productive structure of the economy, including the energy sector, requires long-term goals and a clear vision, backed by reliable data and project preparation, which includes milestones and integrated planning for investment. In this context, the needed change in the underlying financial asset structure also warrants a key role for financial sector policy tools. These entails measures to change the demand from low-carbon and high-emission investments and relative prices and to adequately assess climate-related risks. Among those, a stronger climate information architecture, data, disclosures, and alignment approaches, including taxonomies, is necessary to attract private investors in emerging market and developing economies. High-quality, reliable, and comparable data is a prerequisite to assess and price risks and opportunities, and thus make informed investment decisions. A weak climate information architecture increases the risks of greenwashing. Those are investments wrongly marketed or classified as climate beneficial, and reduces market transparency. A robust climate information architecture actually provides climate data, companies' targets and plans to align on a low-carbon pathway and ensure accountability. More specifically, transition taxonomies aim to identify the types of activities, underlying technologies, and industrial processes that have the potential for substantial reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, allowing for a common understanding of investments that are conducive to a Paris-aligned transition. They help identify activities that could better align incentives and significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions over time, including in the most carbon-intensive sectors. Transition plans allow companies to communicate concrete climate-related objectives and targets, actions, and accountability mechanisms to achieve their emission reduction goals. The emission reduction targets and criteria in transition taxonomy should be connected to a country's nationally determined contribution, long-term strategy, and their supporting sectoral decarbonization targets. Countries should also devise sectoral transition plans, particularly in the energy sector, as well as develop an investable pipeline of projects supporting the achievement of objectives. The IMF has led and published jointly with the World Bank and the OECD in 2023 a guidance report that identifies common principles and technical considerations to connect countries' climate plans and alignment methodologies such as taxonomies. In addition, building trust in transition finance, especially in emerging market developing economies, involves the adoption of external independent sustainability reporting assurance standards and greater capacity building for assurers. More broadly, financial sector policies should refocus on fostering climate impact, such as the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, to help mobilize private climate finance, while considering specific requirements to emerging market and developing economies. Current financial sector policies often focus on identifying activities and assets that are already green. We touched upon the role of transition taxonomies already. These and other climate alignment tools should integrate measures, for example, for managed phase-out of coal-fired power plants, given the need to leverage private finance. Disclosures and labels for sustainable investment funds should enhance market transparency, market integrity, and alignment with climate objectives to foster positive outcomes for climate impact. Climate impact scores should be constructed to better align climate outcomes with investor expectations on climate impacts. Also, public-private risk sharing, including through enhancing financial capacity and operating model of multilateral development banks, is crucial to attract more private capital in emerging market and developing economies. Innovative financing instruments can help overcome the real and perceived hurdles to private investment in emerging market and developing economies. Blended finance, including the enhanced use of multilateral development banks and donors' guarantees, can greatly help to achieve risk sharing and broaden the investor base if they're designed well and used appropriately. In low-income countries, larger international public support is essential given the steep challenges in attracting private climate finance. Finally, the IMF Resilience and Sustainability Facility, operational since 2022, can help catalyze private capital by enhancing a country's capacity for climate investments with a combination of policy reforms, capacity development, and longer-term financing. It complements the IMF's existing lending toolkit and provides longer-term financing to strengthen economic resilience and sustainability by, first, supporting policy reforms that reduce macroeconomic risks associated with climate change, and two, augmenting policy space and financial buffers to mitigate the risks arising from such longer-term structural challenges. Its role is to amplify the effect of the $650 billion general SDR allocation implemented in 2021 by channeling resources from economically stronger members to countries where needs are the greatest. It is based on the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, which is a loan-based trust administered by the IMF with a governance and financial structure broadly similar to that of the long-standing Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. RST resources are mobilized based on voluntary contributions from IMF members with strong external positions, including those wishing to channel SDRs, special drawing rights, for the benefit of low-income and more vulnerable middle-income members. The financial architecture is designed to ensure the safety and liquidity of contributors' loan and deposit claims on the trust, which will retain their reserve asset character while minimizing the need for budgetary contributions. The RSF provides policy support and affordable longer maturity financing with a 20-year maturity and a 10.5-year grace period to help build resilience against long-term risks to balance of payment stability. About 3/4 of the IMF's country membership is eligible for RST financing, including low-income countries, as well as most middle-income and all small developing states. Through its convening power, the IMF can bring together governments, MDBs, multilateral development banks, and the private sector to foster the financing of much-needed climate investments. The IMF can help strengthen public financial and climate investment management to support the development of a pipeline of investable projects and provide capacity development to support the development of a robust climate information architecture and sustainable debt issuance and manage climate-related risks in the financial sector. There are a number of important lessons learned from engagement to date of the IMF, especially in countries that have so far accessed the Resilience and Sustainability Facility. First, given that climate financing needs in emerging market and developing economies are substantial and that no single institution can provide financing at the required scale, it is essential that governments, international financial institutions, and development partners work together, leveraging each institution's respective expertise to mobilize additional climate finance. Second, the required scale of climate resource mobilization necessitates coordinated actions across 3 pillars. First, climate policy reforms. Second, capacity development. And third, innovative financing approaches. Using part of the fiscal space that is created by the Resilience and Sustainability Facility arrangements, the loans, in a prudent manner could help crowd in additional financing for climate investments. Any facility that uses public resources should have appropriate governance structures. Project selection, impact reporting, monitoring, and verification processes should be in line with the highest international standards. Furthermore, any climate solution should be customized to each country's unique climate needs and economic characteristics. For example, adaptation and mitigation investments are likely to require different policy solutions and financing arrangements. Limited market size and lack of a robust pipeline of bankable projects are likely to be larger impediments in smaller economies, which may require pooling of projects through regional approaches, for instance. Let me finish with two examples. Barbados, in the Caribbean, and Rwanda, in Africa, provide two examples of intensive collaboration across stakeholders and innovative use of financial resources to crowd in private climate investments in the context of the IMF Resilience and Sustainability Facility. Barbados adopted innovative initiatives to accelerate its transition to net zero and boost climate resilience. The government of Barbados used part of the fiscal space created by the RSF as equity capital for a new blue-green bank, which will provide lending for private sector green investments in affordable homes, hurricane-resilient roofs, and the electrification of transport, among others. The bank is receiving funding support from the Green Climate Fund and USAID, as well as technical support from development partners, including the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean and the Inter-American Development Bank. Furthermore, low-cost and longer-term financing instruments and grants from development partners will support government investment in water, in sanitation, and in flood and coastal protection projects, among others. Development partners will also support government capacity and expertise in public-private partnerships to attract private investment to build more resilient infrastructure. A second example is with Rwanda in Africa. Rwanda similarly adopted a new programmatic approach to supporting climate investments through its Green Investment Facility, IREM Invest, set up by the Rwanda Green Fund and the Development Bank of Rwanda. Under the RSF arrangement, development partners such as the Agence Française de Développement and the European Investment Bank have committed to scale up climate financing with budget support, technical assistance, and long-term low-cost loans. This initiative is expected to fund a pipeline of projects estimated at $400 million, including $130 million in equity contributions from private investors, highlighting the catalyzing role of the initiative. The government of Rwanda is also prepared to scale up the equity of the Development Bank as the pipeline of projects expands further. These are examples that show that there is catalyzing power for the RSF, but also that cooperation among development partners actually works. It's important to scale up private climate finance to ensure there is cooperation among partners, as I said, but also to make sure there is the right amount and quality of financial sector policies that can actually support private climate finance in addition to structural reforms.